G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle, and what I want to do today is start going through the different ranges they've released for Age of Sigmar and try and, well, narrow down the ones I think really they pulled off, and the ones I think need a lot more expansion, the really half-baked ones. Thing is, this is a really difficult job, mainly because of this faction right here, the Stormcast Eternals. You see, most of the factions we're going to be covering off on today, and today's episode is on the Forces of Order, or the Grand Alliance Order. Most of these factions seem to average 14 to 17. I mean, Fire Slayers, 16, 2 of which are books. Caradon Overlords, 17, one of which is a book, 1's an app, and the rest are pretty much double-ups. The Deepkin, 21, but then there's all sorts of books and nonsense in there, and terrain piece. Daughters of Kane, 18. Silverneth, 17. And Lumineth Realm Lords, 14. But we know they've got kangaroo riders and a weird sky spirit coming. So let's go back to the problem child. The Stormcast Eternals. These guys are difficult because, unlike the others, there's very little that changes about them as you go from model to model. My main criticism, I will sum up as this. They do not look good in surcoats. For those who are wondering, the surcoat are like these evocators here. That's where you have armor with a big set of cloth or robes hanging over it. This is really more of a half surcoat or a tabard style, I suppose. A full surcoat, well, these ones here, the sequitors, works well. So that to me is the big problem. The things that work about the army is that shiny boy golden armor. That's what everyone finds neat. When you look at the different units, say Judicators in this case, the frowny Balthazar Gelt style or Death Mask of Sanguinius, that works. The curvature and the proportions of the big chest and abdominal plate, that sort of heroic style of armor with the six-pack, looks great. Once you start to cover that up, you lose the appeal of the army. That's my personal opinion, and that's why I don't think those particular models work, whereas the models that stay away from that stay away from the Sequitor's style, work best. Guys like the Knight Questor on the left-hand side of the screen here, he, to me, is the perfect sort of Sigmarine model that I want to see, whereas this Lord Ordinator on the right hand side is not, because the defining attribute, that really nice armor, is gone. Same thing with the Lord Celestin in the center here. He has this big giant lion headed chest plate, which, although cool, it kind of takes away when you contrast it with the rest of the army. And of course, they're constantly trying to add little bits of extra armor and such on all these models, and I don't know, for some it works, some it doesn't. Some of them, like this Lord Celestin, he has this massive extended pauldron that goes right over the chest. It covers half his chest, in fact. That's actually called a Bessigue, technically, in armor terms. It's like a little shield that's attached to the shoulder guard, and it's meant to protect the armpit. But the thing is, on this model, nothing's ever going to get into that armpit because it's so ridiculously huge. It's like late medieval Renaissance era jousting armor. It's this massive over-the-top armor, which I don't think adds anything to it. Again, Gavriel Shoreheart, apart from the face, which let's all agree it's hideous. Apart from the face, this guy is beautiful, perfect. It's got the six-pack armor, he's got a cloak on the back which embellishes it a little bit. The round shield, I think, really suits the model as opposed to the larger sort of kite shields that some of them have. This is the sort of guy that I prefer in my Sigmarines, basically. The Easter build Steelheart Champions, again, they embody it pretty well. I'm not a huge fan of models like the Fulminators. I don't like the mounts, but that's a personal taste thing. It's not because they're bad in particular for Sigmarines, it's just because I don't like them as a style of mount. The big heavy armor in that, I think if they'd stuck with the traditional Demigryph, might have looked a bit cooler. But personal bias. You get things like this Celestar Ballista, which I don't know if that's meant to rhyme, but it does. Celestar Ballista. It looks like it has bolt gun barrels, like it's a quad heavy bolter, until you sort of flip it around a bit and you're like, oh yeah, it kind of works, kind of doesn't. And of course, the easy to build models have a very 1990s pose with the legs just sort of in line with one another, even if they're bent knee to the side. Yeah, none of that really does much for me. The endless spells are very underwhelming. I think the only one that looks decent out of them is probably the sort of comet striking the ground one. I don't mind the Vanguard Raptors. They look nice with the birds in the background. The long strike crossbows, the ether wings, yeah, it works. But the hurricane crossbows, I don't like as much. I think that little reinforcing monopod, it does a lot for them. It makes them look a lot more like a incredibly huge and unwieldy weapon would be kind of usable. Like an old Arquebus does when it's got the big monopod stick underneath, whereas the guys on the right have these gigantic weapons which you think would just be waste so much in the recoil of firing it and pull them over, but apparently not. Yeah. So all my complaints with the range basically boil down to some weird proportion things, which is much for muchness at Games Workshop, and whenever they do anything that takes away from the nice golden boy armor. Okay, once you start hiding that glorious armor, it kind of ruins them as a range. But that's my personal opinion. I mean, again, once you cover them in a cloak, you're taking away that really neat aspect that makes them cool. And once you start giving them all bare heads, I think that also takes away because that golden mask is so cool. Maybe on characters, you go for the more flamboyant mask, like on this Lord Aquilor, with the lion-helmed head helmet. That's great. That looks beautiful. Yeah, that works, but most of it doesn't. This mount works a lot better as well, by the way, being that sort of demigryph-looking unit, which, again, to point out, looks so much better than their sort of miniature Stardrake creatures that they've got. Keep the lizards to the lizard men, keep the birds to the humans. Yeah. One of the things you'll notice as well in this episode is I'm not going near the cities of Sigmar. It's mainly because we know it's all old stuff, which is slowly being phased out and being just Thanos snapped away over time. Don't really want to go looking at it because it's a completely different style of game and it does just not suit this. Going from the rank and file where everyone stacks up really neatly to the Age of Sigmar where everyone is these big flowing units, yeah, who all hang over the edges of their bases. It's two totally different worlds and we shouldn't really compare them. And you'll see it as we look at some ranges where there's models that have carried over from old school Warhammer Fantasy. You see the difference, some more than others. It's pretty noticeable with Nighthaunt when you look at some of their stuff, but anyway. So the next unit, or army I should say, that was released in Age of Sigmar was the Fire Slayers. Now the Fire Slayers are... well, I like the endless spells, or at least the two that aren't the little flaming wall. The little flaming wall's a little bit silly, but it's not terrible. I think the characters look good. I think the army in general actually looks really great. The weapons are a little bit over the top, but I mean, as far as Games Workshop goes, it's kind of restrained in a lot of ways. I like the runes being embedded into the flesh of the warriors. What lets it down as a range is that basically everything's the same kit. The Magma Droth, 3 different builds of it, and it's basically the character on top that changes, and whether or not it's got its leg on the ground, that front left leg. And I think there's maybe some stuff with its tongue you can change. Yeah, essentially that's the same model. Then the Hearthguard, the Auric Hearthguard and the Hearthguard Berserkers, same box set, so same unit. Then you've got the Volkite Berserkers, and you've got the Fire Slayers, the Chosen Axes, and the Chosen Axes are of course a Warhammer Underworlds warband. So really, Volkite Berserkers is one box, the Hearthguard Berserkers and the Auric Hearthguard is one box, but you can build it either way. So it's basically 2 units to make up all the infantry in your army. Now it's a strong army, plays very hard in Age of Sigmar, and it's backed up by a Doomseeker, a Rune Master, a Battlesmith, and a Grimwrath Berserker. That's it. That's your characters. From there, it's just those characters on Magma Droths. So the range is very bare bones. I do love their bit of terrain. The Magmic Battleforge looks really cool. I'm tempted to convert one into my Chaos Dwarf army for old school Warhammer Fantasy purposes. But yeah, as a range, it's just so thin on the ground. It's half a range. This is half a release. This is the sort of models that was released to make an entire range that you would see as an update to a regular edition for any range in old school Warhammer Fantasy. Like when the Dwarves or the Empire or whoever would get an update, this is the amount of units that would get updated in just a regular release. Not a finalized complete army list, which, you know, the only things, they haven't really added much to this over the years. The Battleforge, the Magmic Invocations or / Endless Spells, and the Chosen Axes are basically everything that's been added since this army was released, and these guys came pretty early in Age of Sigmar. So you're sort of looking at about 4 years of essentially 5 to 7 units, which is not great. But stylistically, love them. Think they look beautiful. A little bit over the top, yes, but again, for Games Workshop, not that crazy. Then we get the Caradon Overlords, which I hate as a faction. It would be easier to swallow as a faction if it was a bit more traditional steampunk. A lot more pipes, coal-fired stuff. Think Chaos Dwarves, old school dwarf gyrocopters, the Empire Steam Tank, Empire Landship, or Marienburg class landship. That sort of thing, if they'd done that, would have worked a lot better. But these are positively... This is like the technology in Captain America when the Nazis are experimenting with alien technology and such. It doesn't fit the universe it's in. Apparently, everything's powered by a mysterious element called Urgold. Yeah, it sounds dumb to say because it is. Thin on the ground again. You've got jumpy boys with essentially guns. You've got jumpy boys with essentially combat gear. You've got the Thundrix Profiteers, which is one of those Underworlds groups. A couple of characters, none of which particularly stand out as good. The Arcanaut Admiral, maybe, and the Navigator, you could almost call squats for 40k, because they suit that aesthetic more than Age of Sigmar's universe. And then you're looking at like a couple of characters and blimpy boys. Some airships, just none of the range works for me. I hate it. I just hate it. Sorry. It would be fine in a different game. It doesn't fit the universe of this game. To have barbarian chaos warriors running around, bludgeoning each other with wooden clubs at best in some cases, versus these guys who have technology greater than what we possess in today's world, pretty much, is just such a weird thing. And I don't think it works. At all. Then we get to another one of those circumstances, which, over time, I hate less. It's gone from hate to just complete mediocrity, and that is the Adonath Deepkin. I think their basic infantry, like the Namadi Thralls, they look good. The characters, though, are a bit all over the place. Just the cartoonish size of things like the Isherin Soul Render in the center. He's got this helmet that's so ludicrously huge, it doesn't work. You put a different head on that model, and maybe it'll look all right. But the giant billhook polearm that he's got, it doesn't fit with the graceful, sleek, elven aesthetic. Whereas, yeah, the Thralls, the Reavers, they all look good. Even the Achillean Guard, the guys riding the eels, kind of work. The Tidecaster, she isn't bad. The Soul Scryer is a bit underwhelming. Latan, Warden of the Soul Edges. has kind of grown on me over time. I think it'd be a fun model to paint. Again, I don't think Age of Sigmar when I look at it. I think some other game system, like a Privateer Press or Dungeons and Dragons even, something like that, like a fun painting exercise, as opposed to something that I want to see in game. And when you read about the development of all of this stuff, it was just things that the developers thought would be cool, as opposed to something that actually fits the narrative or the gameplay, which is probably not a great point to go from. I think movies and media over time have shown us what happens when you put your passion for a project before the actual quality of the project. And this faction really shows it, because I think it was a case of, we can do it, therefore we shall do it. The Shipwreck looks cool, straight out of the aquarium, straight out of the fish tank. It's a shipwreck, what can I say? Could be cooler, I don't know. The Achilles Alapex, the shark riders, literally they're jumping the shark on the shark. Look, Alapex, it's one of those like Sharknado type things, like Mega Shark versus Crocosaurus. The Achilles King and Eidolon, not bad as individual models. The fact that there's two different build versions of both of them, that really not much changes. Instead of being unique special characters, it just doubles up on the same box. Like the developers couldn't decide for themselves which head or which weapon to go with, so they made two different stat lines. Whereas in old school, Warhammer Fantasy, they would have said, okay, it runs with one consistent stat line instead of rules, but you can select some war gear, customize it, make it feel your own. It's one of the best things about old school Warhammer Fantasy was creating a lord that represented what you wanted it to represent on the table, rather than having to get a pre-assigned character and pre-assigned loadout. Chaos is a great example of that. Maybe you're running a character and you go, I don't want to invest in spending a lot of points on armor, so I'm going to go down the route of making a bit of a glass cannon. I'm going to sink all my points into magical weaponry to make this character just an insane alpha strike monster in close combat. Other people go the opposite direction. They go, look, I don't think I can win the alpha strike, I'm going to load up on armor. And you could really make your own character. Age of Sigmar doesn't let you do that. Biggest detriment of the game, and of 40k currently as well, by far. The Leviathan, the turtle itself looks fine. In fact, there's nothing to really hate about the model. The guys on the back work, everything works about it. It just doesn't feel like it belongs in this universe. On the one hand, this universe is trying to be sort of semi-grounded in some kind of reality with the mortal kingdoms, the cities of Sigmar. And on the other end, it's got this just completely extreme, far, high fantasy faction. Which, again, you compare it to old Warhammer Fantasy, where it was very much like a Tolkien's world. The elves exist, and they're superior to humans, but the technology is not so superior. Like, they've got bows, but they're just better bows. They wield magic, but it's more subtle, and they're more deft about it, and it comes more naturally to them. And, the dwarves have better technology and better armor, but they spent centuries perfecting just little things, whereas humans are inventing things rapidly over time, and they have a lot of mistakes along the way, but they learn from their mistakes. And the universe builds itself in Warhammer Fantasy. The craziest thing in that is probably a mix between the undead and lizardmen. Everything else just kind of works. You don't have to suspend too much disbelief. These guys you do. Then we get to the Daughters of Kane. And with the Daughters of Kane, you have some carryovers from old school Warhammer Fantasy. Witch Elves and Sisters of Slaughter and the Cauldron Blood. So let's think. I think the Doomfire Warlocks actually also might be carries over from 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy. So the Cauldron, Sisters of Slaughter, Witch Elves, they're all 8th edition fantasy carryovers. And you can see it. They are definitely dynamic by the standards of Warhammer Fantasy. The Sisters of Slaughter actually overhang their bases with their whips, and they've got quite a few poses. I mean, Witch Elves have always been dynamic. Probably the most dynamic models in the Warhammer Fantasy range, except for maybe War Dancers. But you can see they mostly especially on the Witch Elves, they're on top of their own base. And their weapons don't tend to hang out off their base. Whereas you compare it to Medusae Blood Sisters, who, again, the Medusae Blood Sisters are mostly on the base. They're pretty subdued for Age of Sigmar, but they do still overhang it. They are bigger sculpts. They've got more stuff going on, especially once you give them bows. Then the Canary Heart Renders. Well, these guys have to overhang their bases because they've got giant wings, but even then, they're very dynamic. They're all leaning off in crazy different directions, and they all have the Tactical Rock on their base. By the way, Tactical Rock, I need to make its own video. It's a weird range because half of it is 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy, and the other half, can you even call it half? Marathi, the Bloodstalkers, and the Hinari. I'm going to call them the Hinari. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. I don't care. Silly name. They are new. So half the range is new, more than half the range is old. And they've had to tie in the new and the old stuff a little bit better. Again, when you get to the Nighthaunt, you probably see the greatest discrepancy between new and old, because you have these really basic units like the old Canwraith or the old Banshee, and then you put that up against like the new Wraiths and Banshee stuff, and Mirmor Banshees, and you're just like, holy crap. It sticks out like a sore thumb. The Hex Wraiths especially look god awful. Spoilers for that. On the whole though, I actually, just to go back a second, really like the whole faction. Everything about it. The only thing I don't like on Marathi is her wings, as the sort of smaller, regular Marathi, we'll call her, not big giant Gorgon Medusa Marathi. See this model, fine, don't touch it. Looks great. Snakes in the hair, everything. I mean, I don't know how she becomes that. I mean, I hear she combined with her Dark Pegasus, but that's just dumb. These wings here don't work for me. The wings themselves, especially with all that weird bloody ichor dripping off the tips. No. Have her without the wings, or make them much smaller and make it almost like a headdress or a back-mounted plate hanging. That would be more interesting. The big wings here, just, no, because she's got the wings on the big model. It looks better. So as a whole, though, really well done. Then we get to the Silverneth, and I have a very soft spot in my heart for the old school Wood Elves. This is not this faction. Again, Silvernet Dryads. Those Dryads dropped in right at the end of 6th edition Warhammer Fantasy, I believe it was. And it shows. Because, I mean, they were, again, super dynamic for the time. A lot of detail, very interesting, cool stuff. When you compare them to the white metal Dryads and Treemen and Treekin that were there at the time, these looked really, really good. The sharp curved sticks versus the really soft, stumpy look of the white metal stuff. Looked beautiful. But when you compare them to what's right next to them, the Lithari's Guardians, for instance, okay? They are worlds apart. Even the way that the sticks and branches and vines make up their bodies are just so different. Because on the Dryads, there's sort of a wood grain to everything. And you can see it all over, the legs and everything. It's not just painted on, it's actually sculpted on grain to every part of them. You can see it on the heads. The grains head up the foreheads and then blend into the vines that make up the hair. Again, these are hand sculpted range. Whereas if I show you something like the Tree Revenants, okay, there's no grain at all. The models have hard edges that you can highlight, yes, but no grain or texture to the wood that makes up their bodies. The only time you get something approaching a grain is on the actual vines and branches, and even then it's pretty iffy if you can call it grain and not just edges for highlighting. So essentially what they've done is take detail away, in a sense. It's not timber anymore, it's almost like plastic panels, or ironic considering they are made of plastic, but again, let's compare the old branch wraith. So you can see it's not just painted on. Those striations on her butt cheek and the timber that makes up the knotted timber of the base that she's standing on, and the gnarly arm that she has, you can see there's texture there. Now we go back, contrast it with this branch witch. There's not texture here. There are almost like a rock. There's hard edges that you can highlight. I hope I'm demonstrating the difference here for people to see. So that really stands out to me. The endless spells, I think, on the whole, look really good, especially the floating tree one. The awakened wildwood looks fantastic. The tree men, as in Durthu, Tree Lord, etc., they're all fantastic models. Alariel, the Ever Queen, beautiful, love it, great to see. Yeah, it's just that divide between the old and the new. Dryads, the new version, looks really nice. I love it a lot. The only thing that lets it down is these silly beetles all coming out of her little honeycomb structure, which, again, you can at least, they're optional on this kit. You don't have to have them on there, which it helps sell it for me, that I don't need to include those. In theory, I can skip them. So that's nicer. But yeah, love it as a model. The Kuranoth Hunters, which are the old treekin. Yeah, they're great. They come with bows as well, I believe. Yeah. Again, that same sort of issue. They don't have really grainy timber that makes them... Oh, they kind of do in the knee joint, but only in the knee joint. The rest of them looks like armor. Like some kind of hard-edged, smooth, almost chitinous, beetle-like armor. It doesn't suggest tree to me. They're trying to suggest it more with the paint scheme than the actual sculpt, I guess is what I'm getting at. Durante, the Arch Revenant, is probably the model I like least in this whole force. The helmet on that body doesn't look right. I think it'll look far creepier without the helmet, and the wings and that tiny little shield look like arse. The wings needed to be bigger if it was going to have them, and at a different angle, maybe up high in the air instead of just having this beetle on the back. Hell, take the beetle off. Instantly better model. And the tiny little shield doesn't work on such a large model in this case. And instead of tactical rock, we have a high heel boot and a skull, tactical skull. Yeah, Silverneth, like the Witch Elves, but to a much greater degree, a haphazard range, but a range that I like. And then we get to the Lumineth Realm Lords, which here is a weird case of having fantastic line infantry. The Dawn Riders look great, their cavalry option. The Aurelan, I don't know how you pronounce that, Aurelan Sentinels, they look great with their sort of Yumi style bows, although the 3 strings at the top, 1 at the bottom, makes zero sense. They just did it because they thought it was cool in the development room, which... Again, I hope people are learning this lesson. We spoke about it during the Christmas special. The developers have set page limits on their books. They're told that they have to fit their range into. The models are already pre-designed. Marketing has certain things they want to approve. And basically the game is the very last priority to these people. And the people designing these models seem to know nothing about real armor and combat these days. I mean, at least when the Perry brothers were there, they did a heap of like recreation stuff. And because they did recreation and playing as doing HEMA and such, they understood what they were sculpting. Whereas the people now, I don't know, I get like Avatar: The Last Airbender vibes from this faction. But anyway, I digress. Infantry all looks great. The problem is when you hit the creatures and characters. I like the Light of Eltharion, personally. I know a lot of people don't. I know the headdresses on the Alaris Stone Guard are a bit over the top, but for me they work, and I think they would look really good on Slaaneshi worshippers. In fact, I got a bunch of the cavalry heads here to put on the Slaaneshi Mordebeck's Twin Souls, or whatever they are. The Twin Souls that are coming for the Slaanesh Head Knights. Yeah, helmets for them. The Stoneheart King. So top-heavy. The fact that it's a walking bonsai is not so bad. It's the fact that it's a walking bonsai, and they gave it just these everlasting shoulders that just, these plates that make up the pauldrons that just keep going and going and going and then curve upwards, echoing the horns on the cow's head. Doesn't work. The rest of the model kind of works. It probably doesn't help that the shoulders sit so much lower than the head. It throws it out of those traditional proportions that we're used to. I guess, yeah, if you dialed back in the shoulder pads, it'd probably be a much nicer model than people give it credit for. But it's not, and what we've got is not a particularly nice model. It's okay. It's the definition of okay. It is a model, it is presentable, and I know what it is. The Alaris Stone Mage, I made a meme of when I first saw it previewed. The meme was that little floating cork that he's sitting on falls out of the way, and then he falls butt first onto that obelisk, and you can imagine what happens and the look on his face. That was the meme I made, because that's what I foresaw happening. He's hovering, or levitating, on top of a rock, levitating on top of an obelisk, which is levitating above the ground. Why? Why all those steps? Couldn't it just been like a Slann Mage Priest? Just he's hovering on a rock, which is hovering above the ground? Why this 3-stage intricate hovering process? It just seems silly to me. Again, someone got carried away with CAD and just kept adding another level of hover. Teclas. Teclas himself is a downgrade in a lot of ways from the old Teclas. Doesn't look like him. It's him reincarnated with a completely different fashion sense, I suppose. It looks very Persian. I won't say Assyrian, I'll say Persian. I love the Spirit of Hish in the background, the Selenar. That thing is gorgeous. The best thing about the Tyrion model is not Tyrion, it's his mount, which just on its own would look beautiful. Beautiful as a monster in Age of Sigmar. But it's on a base which is a little bit over the top. I mean, it kind of works because at least it's a monster on it, but it's a big base with, again, all the bonsais going on and such. Yeah, Tyrion himself's a bit of a letdown. And the fact that they didn't make a foot version of Tyrion, and you're sort of forced into having him floating up there. Like, how do you transport this? I've been over it before, but in a recent episode where I talk about the Head Knights, how do you transport something so outlandish as that in, say, a foam case? Like, Games Workshop makes cases for their miniatures. They supply the cases for their miniatures. They expect you to use. How do you transport this thing in one of those cases? Explain that to me. He is so high up off the ground and supported only by the cloak, and the cloak is only held to his body by 4 little gems, okay? 2 that go under his pauldrons, his shoulder guards, and 2 that attach to his wrists. That's it. So those tiny little points of contact have to support his whole body, and you've got to pray that this thing does not get snapped when you hop on an aeroplane to travel to another state to attend a function. I'm sorry, but no. If Games Workshop is going to insist on putting out miniatures like this, they need to start putting out cases to transport them in. Because, I mean, even third parties struggle to make cases for some of this stuff. It is not great. I got an Age of Sigmar. I got a couple of Age of Sigmar armies, believe it or not. I have a Nurgle one, and I've got a Nighthaunt one. And in my Nighthaunt one, the Lady Olinda is basically floating on a single tiny little bit of cloak and has these 2 banshees, maidens, whatever you want to call them, hanging off the sides of her, which themselves are only held on by little cloaks. It's just I'm lucky I've not broken it yet, because I've been super careful packing it every time I'm like, ugh, as I pack it away. The Sinari Cathala, I don't know how you pronounce it. Dumb names. Dumb, trademark-friendly names. It's okay. I want to know what she's doing with a bunch of Ghastly's ghosts coming out of her little smoky cauldron. They can't do smoke and flame effects to save themselves. With all the fancy 3D sculpting they've got, they constantly mess it up. Lightning's another one. All the lightning they do, just a pet peeve, never looks right. It looks too rounded off. I don't know, how do you describe it? Lightning is something so hard to capture in physical form. The old lightning in a bottle metaphor. It's so hard to capture. I don't know why they keep trying to attempt it, because it never looks quite right. But not my favourite English spells. In fact, some of the worst. Again, I like the Light of Eltharion, and a lot of people don't. I love that. So, yeah. Eclectic range. So I guess the armies of order really boils down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 armies that are all half an army. They just completely lack some sort of quantity or variety, okay? Whereas then you get to really the only faction they want people to play in Age of Sigmar, it seems at times, the Stormcast Eternals, where you've got like 60 units. So there's more units in the Stormcast Eternals than all the other armies of order that have been released since. Like, that's just crazy. That's just crazy. Okay? It's too much. It's too much. They need to bring the other armies up to this level and basically just make nothing more for the Stormcast Eternals for a while. Just sit on them. No more characters, because they keep bringing out like individual characters. Heraldor and Vexilor and Ordinator and Quester and Celestant, Shoreheart, Starstruck. Lots and lots of single characters. Now, I know some of them have been there since the inception of the game, I get that, but it's a lot at this point. So calm down, we don't need 60 Stormcast Eternals. What we do need, again, once you take away the 2 books, the spells, the terrain, and the double ups, that's something like 12, I think? Maybe less. Let's count them. Doomseeker, 1. Fireslayers, 2. Volkite Berserkers, 3. Runemaster, 4. Grimwrath Berserker, 5. Battlesmith, 6. Hearthguard Berserkers, 7. Doubles up with the Auric Hearthguard, so we're not going to count them. And the Magma Droth, which there's 3 versions of, is 8. 8 models makes up the entire range. Are there, out of curiosity, other armies of order in Cities of Sigmar which still have more than that? There probably is. Let's see. Ah, damn it. Cities of Sigmar is what I want, not all armies of order. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 for the old Empire at least, 5 with the General, 6 Hellstorm Rocket, 7 Hellblaster, 8 Outriders, 9 Crossbowmen, which I think doubles up with Handgunners, 10 Great Swords, 11 with the Celestial, which doubles up with the Luminarch, 12 Karl Franz / General, 13 Demigryph Knights, 14 Steam Tank. Anything else? Okay, so there's almost twice as many old Empire units that have survived the constant culls and cuts. Twice as many Empire units as there are Fireslayers units, and Fireslayers are one of the core new release armies that they've made. Are any of these new armies in order more units? Well, Lumineth, take away the books, and the double ups, and there's 4 less models straight away. But you can add 2 new ones to that because they're getting some more models, but it's still less models than the old Empire. What about Silverneth? They got 17 results, but take away their Battle Tome, take away a double up, take away their Endless Spells, take away the double ups on the Tree Ward Ancients, and it drops you down to 12 models, or 12 units. And the start collecting Silverneth, let's not count that, so let's go to 11. So 11 units. So this, which carries over units from the old Wood Elf range, less models than the Empire still has. Daughters of Kane. Let's remove the book, the Daughters of Kane Start Collecting box, remove the double up for the Witch Elves and Sisters of Slaughter, remove the double up for the Melusi Blood Sisters, and remove 2 double ups for the 2 different types of cauldrons. And that takes 7 away. Oh, and then take away the Marathi book. 8, Daughters of Kane Tome, Shadow and Pain, 9, 10. Broken Realms, 11. And Daughters of Kane, 12. So, really, it's 6 distinct units, or 6 boxes in the army, one of which is just Marathi. Oof, that culled it pretty fast. Right, Adonath Deepkin. Thralls and Reavers is 1 box. The Shelling Guard and the Morsar Guard is 1 box. The Turtle is its own, well, it's got 2 versions, I think, but whatever. Volturnos is a double up. Eidolon has a double up. We got 1, 2, 3 books, 4 books, 5 books. So that's 7 straight away off the bat. Take away the terrain, that's 8. And take away the start collecting, so that's 9. So it goes from being 21 models in the Adonath Deepkin range to 12 models, which is 12 distinct kits. What? Sorry, I didn't do the double up. Never mind. Yeah, just thinking out loud here as I record. And carried on Overlords. Once you take away characters, what are we left with? We're left with a couple of blimps, and yeah, this is another one of those ranges which is like 8 models or something. So yeah, there are carries over of ranges from old school Warhammer Fantasy, was my point, and those carryover ranges are missing half their shit from old Warhammer Fantasy, okay? And yet those old ranges from Warhammer Fantasy still rival or exceed the new ranges in size. Let's look at Dwarves. Dwarves are a great example. We still got Longbeards, yes. We've got Runelord, Warden King, Cogsmith. That takes us up to 4 units there. The Dwarf range has been gutted. Gyrocopter and Gyro Bomber. Although I think they use the same box, so we'll just call that 1. So that's 5 units. Hammerers and Longbeard share a box, so we won't count that. Iron Drakes / Iron Breakers 7. So there's still 7 dwarf units. So the old dwarves that have had their range absolutely gutted, lost all their war machines, lost their clansmen, lost their quarrelers, lost their thunderers, lost their miners, still equals the fire slayers in size for the volume of units. Dark Elves, let's see. We've got Dark Shards. Okay. I'm not sure if they double up with anything, so I want to quickly look. Nope, Dark Shards are just that. They are just Dark Shards. Assassin, Sorceress, that's 3. Black Ark, Fleet Master, 4. Dread Spears, 5, which doubles up with the Bleak Swords. Then you've got Chariot, 6. Blackguard, 7. Dreadlord on Black Dragon, 8. Corsairs, 9. Dark Riders, 10. Hydra, 11. So there are more models in the Dark Elf range that basically they tie with the Deepkin on the amount of models they've got as a faction. And again, gutted as a range. No more Reaper Bolt Thrower. For instance, no more Old Marathi. Okay, the Sisters of Slaughter and all that, it's been taken by the Witch Elves, although technically they're still there for the Dark Elves, so I guess you could add that to these guys, which makes them even bigger again. Yeah, it's rough. What else are they missing? They're missing Shades, they're missing most of their special characters. And then we've got High Elves. High Elves have Shadow Warriors. They've still got the Frostheart Phoenix / Flamespire Phoenix. That's 2. Oh, I missed the Drakespawn Knights. So yeah, it's 12 models for the Dark Elves. Shit. Don't even start on how gutted the Wood Elves are. Yeah, High Elves have been super gutted. Like 3 distinct models in their range. No characters. Like, how Games Workshop are you supposed to run this fucking army if you've got no characters for it? Just how possible is it to run old school High Elves? Do you need to already have a High Elf army just stashed away if you want to run them? Because that's pretty much the only way you can run these guys. Oh, Phoenix Guard. Phoenix Guard. Well, that makes it all better. What about, like, you know, White Lions? What about their Eagle Core Bolt Throwers? Like, what happened to all that stuff? What about mages, characters, dragons? Anyone remember these things? How are you supposed to run these old like, why even keep them on the web store? Are you just got stock in a warehouse, and once all the stock's gone, then they disappear, never to come back? That seems to be the business approach. Seems like a real screw you, though. Why even bring out rules to update them? It's just silly. Yeah, so anyway, probably a boring episode for a lot of people, but on the whole, I like more than I hate. I liked the Fire Slayers. I liked the Silverneth. I like the Witch Elves. I actually like the Lumineth Realm Lords. Don't get me wrong, they fall down in character, and in the characters, I should say. And the Spirit of the Mountains / Stoneheart Kings is very hit and miss. But overall, positive vibes for 3 of the factions. Like, real positive vibes. I'm pretty positive on the Stormcast Eternals. I also really like the Fire Slayers. So that's a solid 5 different factions in all of the Grand Alliance of Order that I either really like or just like. And then you've got the Caradon and the Adonis Deep King, both of which I dislike. But again, because they are so left of field compared to all the other factions which kind of fit better into their universe. Where again, everything else sort of, it feels like it comes from a natural place. These guys don't. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Age of Sigmar for the Grand Alliance of Order. And I will come back soon, in the next week or 2, and talk about the next Grand Alliance, which will probably be the Grand Alliance of Chaos. The reason I'll do Chaos next is because that's obviously the one that's gotten probably the most love, I guess. There's been a bit of love given to the undead over time. Very little love to destruction, though. Let's just get that out there. So destruction will probably be last. It'll be Chaos next, and then death. And again, I will contrast what there is with what there was, and just my general thoughts on the game, how they fit into the world, and if I think the range has been fleshed out enough or not. So, what do you think? Comment below. Don't forget to say hi to the regulars who will pop in and just say hi to everything. Those guys are always fun. And see you all next time.